I worked out everything and we just rolled the intro, so we are officially live. So,
Right.
hi
Awesome.
everybody. We've got Justin here and Mackenzie here. And we're gonna have awesome conversation tonight. And welcome all of you for joining in, either listening live and watching on recording. Today we join forces with Justin from SketchUp Essentials, and I think he's much more famous out there. But if you can do a little bit of an intro piece, please.
Sure. My name's Justin. I run a YouTube channel called the SketchUp Essentials. And basically, my entire goal is to keep people up to date on what's going on with SketchUp and teach people how to use SketchUp. In addition to running the SketchUp Essentials, I'm also a general contractor in my day job and I do estimating. I don't have any free time, basically. But, uh, but that's okay because this is a lot of fun. So, I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah, awesome. And I kind of titled this session as SketchUp 2025. And we're just going to unravel some of the new features that are known out there already, but we're going to talk about some of the workflows of each feature and some of our thoughts based on the release, and also perhaps some more future features that we are kind of expecting to see, that sort of thing during this session here. So why don't we go through some of the list uh, as we kind of start off. So I'm gonna share my screen first. And there is a release note from SketchUp side. Yeah. So for anyone's benefit here, when SketchUp releases their new versions, they tend to have this release notes. It dates back to 2024, 2023. So some of the features that you haven't touched on for a while, then you can just kind of go down this list and see what's the newest thing that they have added to it. And some of the additional, I think this is sort of like a hot fix type of, they will do some fixing with the additional patches. But the main thing is up here. As you click on this, you'll be exposed with some of the new things that they have released recently on 2025 version. So typically, we see sort of an incremental type of updates or addition of features on SketchUp side, but we've seen quite a few 2025, don't you think, Justin?
Yeah, I think compared to the releases we've seen in the past, I would say this one's been a little bit more feature heavy. I mean, especially with the addition of the photoreal rendering or the PBR rendering, because that's a full new feature portion of the program. So
Yeah, and I think I can certainly see their focus on visualization or sort of a bit better visual, at least, is the feel that I'm getting. And I think the first two features are basically that. So, for those of you who don't really know some of these rendering jargons, environments is more of a, if you think of it, I kind of explain this as like a sky or backdrop or
Mhm.
the lighting setup for your global lighting. Any better way to explain this, Justin?
I I mean, yes and no. I mean, the environments is basically adding the ability to do HDRI images, right? So images, I describe them as images that have lighting information associated with them that you can then use to light your scene, and you can toggle those on and off. But basically, that's the way in 2025 that you light the scene. So it's the only kind of artificial lighting that's in there. It's just using like a HDRI backdrop in order to light everything. I guess that's not 100% true because it does kind of use the artificial sun as well. But yeah, that's basically what it's for.
Right. I think um, if I were to load up a model, maybe I can explain a few things a bit better. So
Yeah.
here's a ordinary model that I often use, and then under the default tray, you'll have additional tray that's called environments. And then they have a couple of example ones here. Which one's your favorite?
My my it would have to be the abandoned warehouse.
Abandoned warehouse. Which one is that? The
I,
Oh
that,
my
that
god.
old
that was a
warehouse.
that was a Mike Brightman joke when he was going through and reviewing it, and it didn't really occur to me. But
Uh-huh.
he's like, you now have all these great choices built into SketchUp, like abandoned warehouse and under a
Oh my
bridge.
goodness, stop.
And I'm like, you know what? It's a good point. Like these are kind of odd backgrounds. Like that one is probably my favorite. And one
Right.
thing you should do is go to the edit tab
Yep.
and sorry,
The
I'm cutting
view.
ahead. I'm cheating ahead.
Yeah.
No, go in the environment itself.
Oh,
So
okay.
click on edit, check the box for set sun location. Because
And
what that's going to do is that's going to set the shadows based on the actual
Oh,
sun
yeah.
location.
right.
So now if you rotate it around, it'll use that bright point and your shadows will actually kind of match. So this one does a pretty good job, I think, of casting the shadow. And you're going to have to let up and let it calculate. It calculates on the ground really fast, but it takes a second to calculate the shadows on the surfaces. So there's always a little bit of a delay when you're doing the shadows with these.
Yeah, and also something to note is always to turn off on-ground shadow for under the shadow settings so that it doesn't always end up casting shadow on 0, 0 plane.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that can drive some people completely off there.
Yeah.
And then rotation. So that's
Really cool.
environmental in itself, but it works in conjunction with the other thing that we're about to mention, which is the photoreal materials.
Mhm.
Is it photoreal materials or is it PBR?
It's PBR.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's I think so on previous shows I have mentioned something like SketchUp's gone down this route of technically being correct on some of the terminology, which I personally feel a little bit daunting for some of SketchUp users. My overall thought, and this can be just myself, and obviously they're not gonna detour from what they have already established. But for me, SketchUp was always not technically correct. Push pull was just an extrusion or boolean or the other terms that they use in the modeling world, but they called it push pull because it was intuitive, not technically correct. I think the moment they introduce ambient occlusion, they've gone down this route of being technically correct, but not necessarily more approachable.
Have they yes, but I think the problem that you run into here, and I've run into this a lot, like learning rendering and also teaching rendering, is there are technical names for things, and people that are learning how to do rendering, they have no idea what they mean. And I know because I was one of them.
Yes, I've been there
I
too.
I didn't know what a normal map was or a roughness. I'm like, what are these things? So I think there's a piece here of, I mean, are they photoreal right now? Not really. But if you call it PBR textures, I think a lot of people are going to be like, I don't know what that means.
Right. I think photoreal is a good name for PBR, or I think it's a SketchUp name for PBR. So I'm fine with that. Environments, maybe. I mean, it's not hard word to understand, but ambient occlusion was a really tough pill to swallow for me, at least. But I also did not have a good SketchUp name for it.
Right.
Is it a
Shadows
edge
in
shadow?
crevices.
What is
Yeah.
it?
Shadows and crevices, perfect.
Yeah,
right.
shadows and crevices.
We'll just call it what it is.
Yeah.
Right.
Rename it now.
And I'm
Well,
sure they gone through that practice, just
Mhm.
decided on ambient occlusion. But yeah,
it's kind of an interesting discussion, right? Because it gets back to like what SketchUp is, because the whole goal behind SketchUp has always been to make a lot of this stuff more approachable
Mm,
and like to a degree less technical. You know, like that's kind of what SketchUp is hey, this is easy to use and we make working in 3D easy. And
Hmm.
so it gets weird, especially the further you go down the rendering path, the more like technical the names are and the more people are like, I don't know what any of that means.
right.
So it is kind of an interesting discussion of like, how much do you simplify and how much of the technical stuff do you remove? And what's the balance of simplifying the whole thing versus being more technically correct?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Well, there is quite a bit of technicality to the photoreal materials or
Mhm.
PBR textures. So they kind of go in a bit more depth here. Something that I always struggled, and I actually had to do some research when this was first introduced, just so that I can understand all of this correctly. Ambient occlusion, I understand that. Although that word may not click so well with some people, ambient occlusion is a very known thing in the world of rendering. So it's, yeah, it is shadow for crevices. It's, I love how they just use that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then normal map is basically changing the geometry so that it has a bit of bump, which is technically different from normal map, but bump map, normal map,
Right.
or physically changing the surface height of the material to make it look slightly more uh,
S-
3D ish.
Sort of. I mean, it
It's
gets
an
weird because
illusion.
beyond normal map, there's also displacement map
Mm-hmm.
too, right? And it gets really weird because you jump to other rendering programs and some of them they'll do normal, which kind of like simulates the bumpiness. There's a kind of displacement that simulates the geometry moving up and down, which is more than normals.
Yep.
And then there's like an actual displacement in like V-Ray
Yeah.
that
Fur.
physically moves the
Fur.
geometry.
Yeah.
So it becomes very confusing across the concepts.
Yes, but I don't know if normal describes it. That's why I think I'm slightly against the terminology normal, but
Hmm.
What
normal is a correct terminology here. Yeah, it's more like a bump, or it changes the surface so that it has a bit of more texture, especially when you have a bit more reflection on it or gloss on it, and it gives
Yeah.
this illusion of the surface. Imagine like a
hmm,
brick, so that it's not completely flat surface. It has a bump between the brick and the mortar in between, and it shows angulation of the surface. So that's what the normal is. And here's something I struggle all the time: roughness and metalness. And I think they did try here. And I don't know if this answers for everybody. I personally think they did the better job on Enscape. Have you seen? Let me show you. Well, why don't why don't I put Justin on the spot? So can you explain to me what
hit me.
metalness is? A difference between roughness and metalness.
Yeah. So and I guess this gets talked about a lot more, I think, with more technical rendering programs, right? So like I saw a lot of this with Blender or something like that. With Blender, when you have metalness, it's literally, is this material a metal or not? Right. And it'll act like a metal. And usually over there, you set it to either 0 or 1. Right. Like we have a slider and Blender has a slider, but they're like, yeah, you just set it to 1 or 0. So is it
Hmm.
metal or is it not? But your metalness and your roughness both affect the way that light reflects off of surfaces, right? But when you look at a metal in the real world, it kind of does this like scattering of light a little bit, like almost like a subsurface scattering, where roughness, it's more like, does the light bounce off or
Hmm.
not? So, and honestly, I think at the moment, the metalness effect in SketchUp is better than the roughness effect in the rendering. I mean, I would say probably the strongest effect that they have is probably the metalness in
Okay.
the renderings right now.
And
I
that would make sense though.
I
I mean,
usually depend on roughness, but go ahead, Mackenzie.
well, I feel like that would make sense that the metalness would be the one to win out right now, that it would be an easier one to do because roughness, that's including more shadows that are like micro shadows, to
Mm,
show that depth and to show what it actually looks like. Whereas metalness, like you're just playing with light, just like you showed a little bit ago with the environment that they already have showed that they know how to do. So, of course, metalness is going to be an easier one to accomplish.
Right. I
Hmm.
think, well, I have a good example because they kind of explain this on roughness and they didn't say metalness. I guess they said metallic. Uh,
metallic, yeah.
yeah. The way I understood this one was very clear to me. So, metallic, it's for at 100%, it's meant to obviously represent a metal.
Mhm.
0% is non-metallic, but all other values are do not occur in reality. So I think
Right.
that's where it's really clear. So there's really no point on driving 50% because in reality that doesn't really happen. So it's either metal or it's not.
Right.
And I guess this more of a tick box at that point. And then how much of a surface is reflective, I think it's just moreover controlled with the roughness is what I
Mhm.
kind of understood. So the way I do this, and whether I do it correctly or not, I don't know for sure. But the way I do this is that most of the materials are going to receive some amount of roughness depending on how reflective I want to make that thing. And then if I want it more mirror like metal surface, whereas like a car clear coat paint, where it has a reflection of not just the glossiness of a light reflection, where if I want a picture within showing off reflection showing on the material, then I drive up the metalness or metallic to 100% so that it becomes, you can see your reflection in that material is the way I kind of understood this overall thing. So in contrary, mirrors would be metalness 100% because you have to see the actual image of a reflection on there. Whereas if it is more of a reflective surface of like a wood, for example,
Mhm.
then it's not intuitively it is not metal, so your metalness is zero, but the roughness will be almost smooth, meaning the roughness will be close to zero so that it is more reflective.
Mhm.
Whereas if you want a bit more satin or matte look
Hmm.
of the wood, then your roughness will basically go up. So
Hmm.
you have lesser amount of reflectiveness. Now, I typically do most of the surfaces matte, meaning I don't throw in a lot of reflection on generally all of my renderings. I feel
Mhm.
having a lot of reflection everywhere makes it feel very busy and
Mhm.
not focused on the things that I want to focus on. So that's where my sort of conceptual rendering or trying to focus on design aspect comes in to play. But generally, I keep all the roughness at the highest, and it actually eats less amount of resource. If the moment that you introduce a lot of reflection in your model, it can
Mhm.
bog your computer down. So that's also another aspect to think about as you dial some of these things in. Relative to that, also, there's something in the preferences, I believe. Um,
I think it's model
yeah,
info.
no, here, graphics.
Oh, got it.
Yeah, there is this option now, automatically enhance materials. And I purposefully turn these off so that they're not generating automatically the materials
Hmm.
into the photoreal materials because I'd like to stay within non-photoreal element aspect for a longer period of time where I want to have a bit more control over it. So that's something that I decided to turn off as well. So there's a little bit of tip there. But obviously, if you like to use it all the time, then why not? Keep it on.
Huh. I did not know about that one.
Yeah, it's something that I
Sweet.
just found out. Yeah. So next one is generate textures. I found this really, really cool. And I think it makes perfect sense that it is in conjunction with photoreal materials. What do you think, Justin?
Why don't we talk about what it is first, and then I can give you my opinion.
Yeah, go ahead. I like that.
Okay. All right. So basically, what this is most of the time when you deal with photorealistic materials or PBR materials, what you're doing is you're bringing in different maps, right? So you're bringing in that normal map, you're bringing in the metallic map or the metalness map, all that different stuff. But sometimes, and this is especially true with like 3D warehouse models because they've been sitting there forever, you don't have those maps on those materials. And so there's a button in the materials section where if you click on it, it actually does two things. So the first thing it does is it will try to generate those maps automatically from the image. So it's kind of an AI texture map generator is what it'll do. So it'll try to generate your normal map, your roughness map, all of those whenever you click on the button right there. To varying levels of success.
Yes.
I
have not tried this specific texture before, so we'll see what
It's gonna be a
happens.
good one.
We'll all find out together. Yeah, it didn't really do all that much.
Yeah.
Which is fine. That's actually preferable. But it looks like it generated, normal, a roughness, and an ambient occlusion map.
Yeah,
down
and in
below.
order to see those photoreal material, I guess we didn't touch on that. You have to go to View, Face Style, and Photoreal Materials.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and then that way, it generates, it applies some of those materials that we just discussed. So normal map, we can increase it so that it should show some variance, but you can do that.
So what I've found is the more visible it is depends on where the sun is. And they really only show up when you're like straight on from the sun. It really affects the way that they show up. So you can see it a little bit better from locations like that versus if the sun was just like way off to the side.
Yep.
So, I mean, it does a decent job of generating those materials. Now, there's another thing that it does, and this is the thing that I'm both really interested in and also really don't like, is when you click on that button, it doesn't just try to generate the PBR maps, it also tries to make the texture seamless. So if you bring in an image of a texture, it will use AI to try to make it seamless.
Yeah, that's the goal. So far, 2 out of 0. 0 out of 2.
Yeah.
So I have issues with the way this is set up. And my issue with the way that it's set up is a lot of the time, I don't necessarily want this to change my base diffuse texture image, right? Like I've gone out, I found an image and I want to apply it to a surface. I don't want it to try to use AI to change that texture if I'm just trying to generate PBR maps, right? So in my opinion, there should be two buttons here. There should be a make seamless button and there should be a generate PBR textures button.
I like that.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Because otherwise it's like, okay, it generates, PBR maps, but it also takes your image and like sometimes it does a really great job. Like I was on a call for SketchUp once and somebody had this wallpaper that they were trying to do and they just had like a snip of, it was like geese or something. It was like repeating geese.
Mhm.
And I was like, all right, we can try this. And I threw it on there and it was perfect. It was
Well,
like
this
seamless,
this
Yeah,
seamless,
the
worked really.
beans
seamless.
look good.
Yeah, the beans.
Yeah.
I don't know why I have texture of
Yeah, I don't
beans
either, but
in
I
my
love it.
model, but this one worked pretty well.
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
give that. Yeah.
Sometimes it
Mhm.
works great. And sometimes it's just like, I absolutely can't use this. And the other thing I don't like about it is it changes your original material that's in your model. So if you don't like what it does, you can't just click back to the other material. You have to remember to undo. And if you don't, and you go a few steps down the way, it's replaced that material in your in model section,
Right.
Yeah.
which is not ideal because you're like, oh, I can't get my material back anymore.
I see.
So
it needs a couple more options on top of this.
yeah, I love the idea and I love the direction they're going. And D5 has a similar option to this where you can click and generate the PBR materials, but it doesn't try to make things seamless, and it's great. I just feel like it should be 2 features instead of 1.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I appreciate that take. I don't. Is D5 always AI generating as well?
I don't think it's always, but it has the option to click on a button to do that.
I see. I see.
They have several pretty good AI features built in. So
For longest time, Enscape had pretty good. If you decide to use albedo for, say, the bump or the normal or texture map, they did decent job of making that happen correctly. And it has nothing to do with AI. This was way before all of that. But getting a bump map or a bit of what they call texture, and then basically, sorry, the height map. They have a distinction between bump, normal, displacement map, but you're doing height map, meaning you're using this specific beans to do angulate on a surface, and they always done a pretty decent job. They didn't need the help of AI or anything to do that. And
Right.
that was always pretty good for me. Here, they're somehow generating some of these reflection slash roughness, or sorry, the metalness, roughness, and the normal type of maps, and it is generating. And like Justin said, it may not be your wanted result, and there's not an easy way to like undo and go back to the original map. There's no way to sort of reference that or choose which one to generate or make it seamless versus not. For this one, we had a good success, but the other ones didn't really make it seamless. So,
The other thing I would really like to see is if you look at those maps, it feels like you should be able to click on that button with the little pencil on it and the square and
pencil.
edit the map.
Oh, I see.
Right?
Yeah.
But if you click on it, it doesn't do that. It just pops up a window and it's just a place for you to load in a map.
Right.
So if you AI generate the map, there's no way to like access it right now, because a lot of the time what I like to do is just take the roughness map and maybe like up the contrast or something a little bit in Photoshop or something like to get a more defined result. But right now it generates these maps and I don't know where it puts them.
Is
so
this
I can't
not
go post-process them
anymore? Is this not it?
That is your initial. Well, that's a good question.
I'm
actually.
loading it up. I actually have this again, another tip of mine, but in Photoshop, it looks though. Okay, let's do a test. I'm gonna actually undo.
I love tests.
Yeah, and then I'm just gonna sample this map. So this is the original beans.
Yeah.
Why of all things beans?
The beans are awesome.
Okay. So this one.
Where's that?
I feel like at the end of this video, you're going to roll out your new coffee product. Like, support the show. Buy our coffee.
No, this is AI generated one. You can see there's a bit of a overlap of image down here. There's a little bit of seam going on here, but it was trying to blend some of those differences, whereas this one, everything is just clear cut. Another tip on Photoshop side to do some of these seamless texturing. By the way, we're going into the realm of Photoshop here.
No, you're good. I need this.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Yeah, keep going.
So when you texture this, I like this. When you texture this, obviously it's not seamless. And the way to blend some of the seamlessness is you go to the, filter, other, offset. If you do offset, what it does, it basically drags that texture across your crop plane. Now you get to
Okay.
see the texture, but because we dragged it, it means that above here is here, so it's going to be seamless at those junctions. Now on Photoshop side, you have different tools to now either AI match or do a bit of a brushing so that it kind of covers up some of those junctions.
Oh,
And now I have done some
yeah.
of that, right? So
I've made my life so much harder for years.
well,
This is
you're welcome.
exciting.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so you're welcome. So I've done a little bit of patching. Obviously, this is not the perfect job, but at least this
Better than it
way.
was.
And then I save this over, and because this was directly off of SketchUp, if I go back to it, it will just apply that automatically.
Honestly, it's pretty darn good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's how the dark spot is that one. So I needed to better patch that one than what I just saved that over, go over here, and that's been patched up. So that's how you make
Yeah.
seamless texture. Photoshop 101, seamless texture generating without hitting the AI generate button on SketchUp side. But yeah, that's what you need to do. Here, I guess things are a bit less tiley because even if you do that, you can't really tell where the seam was exactly. So I think they're kind of doing this on the background.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, one thing I do not only keep reminding myself, but I also try to remind other people too, because the internet is a place where people can be like, this is the worst thing ever because it's not perfect. This
Yeah.
is a feature that was just rolled out, right? It's absolutely brand new. And to compare it to something like an Enscape or anything like that, like, first of all, they don't really do the same thing, but it's something that's going to grow and develop over time. And I think there's a base here of really interesting features like that AI non-tiling function.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes it's like, oh, well, you got to put it out in the world and let people try it and then figure out what about the workflow works and what doesn't. And it's going to grow and iterate. So
Right.
I do think it's exciting, even if things like that don't work as well as I would like them to the first go round. So
Yeah, but I do like their general direction because I think it's only helping with people who's wanting a little bit of physical materiality on their model. So
right.
the ambient occlusion really helped. I don't know if it helps for these blobby trees, but in general, some of these shadows on the crevices really help to define the geometry. And then now I have just applied metalness onto the metal panels here, and they actually look like it is reflecting that color of the light that's on that side of the building. So it really helps to define that kind of trial and error of the reflection.
So one exercise I do a lot when I'm looking at this, because I'm like constantly looking at this renderer and just trying to figure out like, all right, is it doing what I want? But if you just toggle back and forth between the rendered mode and the not rendered mode, like, it's actually, and it would probably be more so if you didn't have or if you had a material that had like a normal map on it, but the difference is actually kind of pronounced when you toggle back and forth. Right. It's like, oh, this is actually doing more than it feels like, but it's kind of understated in its current form. It's almost like a stylized render as
Right.
opposed to a photorealistic render,
Right.
which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing.
Yeah, and I think in general they are moving in this direction of helping people. My biggest gripe, I would say, aside from
Yeah,
some
let's
of
do
the
it. Come on.
naming, biggest gripe is the shadow. The shadow really needs to be softened.
Mm,
Um, and it sounds easy. I know it is hard to achieve that with amount of graphical hardware that you have on the machine. It may be challenging to do that, but it is just downright distracting for me to turn on the shadow and find out that my shadows are going to be like this sharp, because
mm,
you've got the ambient occlusion, which is great at just defining the geometry and then showing where those. I need my shadows to look like ambient occlusion. There needs to be a way.
mm,
I know there's going to be more processing in order for us to do that, but it is just distracting to have this sharp shadow
mm.
on a model that's meant to be looking somewhat more realistic. It needs to
Well,
kind of fade out.
especially if you're using an HDRI, right?
Correct.
Because HDRIs usually cast pretty soft shadows versus an artificial light, which is going to cast more of a hard
Yeah, if I
shadow.
see like some lines across a column that's on the outside face of a building, then I understand. But once you start seeing every bit of leaf casted onto
Mm,
far down here, it's a hard story to tell.
interesting. I would be interested to see some kind of a like shadow softness
Hmm.
slider down in the shadow section.
Exactly.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As soon as you turn on the environments or turn on this photoreal mode, then these shadows from these blobby trees should not be this sharp.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a question for you.
Hmm.
So HDRI images, when you use them in other programs, like they definitely have colors associated with them. Do you feel like the color from the HDRI background is transferred a little bit more to the model and the result in this version of SketchUp as opposed to like because like if you use a blue sky, for example, it makes your model look really blue.
Yes.
And I'm not sure if you get that much blue off of a blue sky in like
It definitely
yeah.
does change the overall tone of a model, and that's what I have realized. So it is important to pick a neutral sky or HDRI image as well, because it can heavily influence. I swear, as an architect, I picked the right tone of a brick, but it's just time of the day and the environment
Hmm.
map that is
Mhm.
messing up my model. I can't have that conversation with my client. So we need something that is more neutral, which is probably something of like this, and then we can start tuning the overall tone of the material or image or something like that. We can't have something that is too far gone to yellow, or if it's forest, yes, your image is gonna look green realistically, but do you want to sell greenhouse green a too green toned
Right.
house? In reality, you want to sell a house that is more representative of, or the idea and the design of what you're doing, not necessarily how it's exactly going to look like in the real world.
Hmm.
Hmm.
So I don't know. There's not a good answer to that, but yes, it is absolutely
It,
reflecting the overall
And
tone of the image.
I'm going to throw in my interior design 2 cents. That is
ooh, do it.
like that is color theory through and through. Like you're looking at like me right now with my white background, I'm gonna pop way more.
Hmm.
Versus like if you're going to put me with a dark blue background or even a yellowish background, I'm going to fade away.
Hmm.
And so you have to pick your background that complements and brightens your space versus
Hmm.
say you're doing something that's more grays, a blue is not going to brighten it up. You're going to need
Hmm.
some kind of like a sunset, to kind of help out and everything and make it pop.
Yeah. I feel like somehow the colors from that HDRI
Mhm.
transfer more strongly in the SketchUp renders than if I was to drop it in Enscape. And maybe it's just like me, but when I pick them, I'm like, wow, that's very blue. Like I
That
don't feel
is
like it should
true.
be quite so
It
Yeah.
blue.
it
Yeah.
influences Very, very heavy. That's
Mm-hmm.
correct.
Mhm.
And is that a slider that needs to be there then?
Yeah,
Yeah, is it a saturation thing with
it could
the
be. Mm-hmm.
yeah, I don't know if it's just the way that it samples the colors or what,
Hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there
it
needs to
feels
be some
very
sort of
strong to me.
slider
Yeah.
to control that.
Yeah. Perhaps it changes the environment.
Yep, it does. It should. Yeah, and to me, these sharp shadows were conflicting because of the reflection. This looks good and it,
Mm-hmm.
it looks realistic. I'm expecting more realistic type of shadow, yet I don't see that. Therefore, my brain is not comprehending this image because it's kind of real, but not really at all, and in a lot of aspects. So I think style wise this becomes very confusing is where I have arrived at. I don't think this is the final destination of where SketchUp wants to be either, but just as our overall result, because of the environmental map either having too much color and having very sharp shadows, I like the look of these outlines. But I could let that go if I really wanted to,
Mhm.
but it is a bit of a puzzling look because there's some aspects that are
Mhm.
completely not real. Like this, without the shadow, I think it looks pretty good and more realistic, or the metal reflection and everything. It's just the shadow just throws me off completely, is my thought. Anyways, next one. Trimble Connect. So we can import, save, and reload from Trimble Connect. Trimble Connect is more like a cloud thing that you can save your models and you can share between people. You can do it between iPad or a different type of browser or OS. So sharing across became a lot easier. And that's always been the case with the Trimble Connect, but this time they have included the ability to save out. And what that is it used to be that if you right click, there's going to be save out, and you can save out a component so that you can later use the same component on. So this is like making your own library full of rocks or whatever that you find in your model.
Beans.
Yes, beans and rocks. And but now you have an ability to save out to Trimble Connect so that even if it's not same drive, you can pass it on to somebody else directly off of this dialogue. Anything to add,
That's
Justin?
cool.
I, Not really. I need to do more with Trimble Connect, honestly. There's actually some really cool stuff that it does, like saving iterations of your models and things like that that a lot of people don't know about.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't even gotten in depth in it like I probably should.
Yep.
So I do think it's kind of an underutilized tool for SketchUp that should probably be talked about a little bit more. So
Yeah, and I
for what it's
think
worth.
as becomes more cross-platform, SketchUp is also expanding on iPad area. All of those model sharing is very, very important aspect as we go further along that direction. So yes, I agree to you. I haven't spent enough amount here to say certain things. I haven't explored as much, but
Yeah.
I believe that is a positive direction, and I've seen some of the cool things coming out of Trimble Connect as well. Apply tags to scenes. So
So
go ahead.
so this was actually a bigger deal than a lot of people thought about because it's a very simple thing. But basically, the way that apply tags to scenes works is previously what would happen is you'd set up a whole bunch of views, right? Or scenes, or you'd set up a whole bunch of scenes. If you have like 40 of them, and then you add something new to your model on a new tag, that tag would show up on every single one of those scenes because none of the scenes knew how to reference it,
Yeah.
right? So all of a sudden you've added this new tag and now you have to go through and update 40 different scenes with that tag. But now what this does is it allows you to take a tag, toggle it off, and then apply it across multiple different scenes that you select in the scene manager. So you could just say, no, this tag should be off in all of the scenes or 12 of the scenes just by selecting them. So it actually solved kind of a big problem.
Yeah. So if I assign this correctly, so I just did what Justin was describing, and that has been a struggle. Like if you already set up all of your views so that all of your views don't show this specific layer, and if you had toggled it off and not want to show it, but because all of your views are now set up, all of your layers are already set up, every time you look at on that corner, that's going to show up. But now you can have it hidden, and then all the views that you would not like to show, you can highlight it and then just apply tags to changes. So applies this tags to scenes. I think I don't know if this was worded correctly or the easiest way possible, and I don't think it goes across so well because it sounds like you're adding tags. Like tags as in like description to scenes. But mind you, tags is
I just
our
lost your
layers.
audio. Mackenzie, do you have his audio?
I have his audio.
All right.
Oh, I lost both of you. Hold on.
Oh, okay. I'll continue. So the tags here sounds like a description to scenes, but in the world of SketchUp, tags are layers. So it's applying the layer on and off state to the scenes. Are you back with us, Justin?
I am back.
All right, perfect. Yes, so that's what it does. Actually, there is an extension that I've mentioned, I think, in the last season or something. I forget the name of it. Layer. No.
It was like always off tags or something.
No, there was one thing that visibly showed the state of each scene and the layers that are turned on per scene. And that was an extension that's never developed further than that. Therefore, I forgot about it, the name of it. I'm going to do a little search off screen. Bear with me. I know I shared it with somebody, so I just got to go back to it. Where are you? It was like Viz something Viz layer or crap. It was called. No. It's gonna come back to me later. Layer Viz? Layviz? It was not called tag something. That's for sure.
Yeah, I can't find it either.
Yeah. It was an extension that basically showed everything in a column, so each scene in each row, and then all the tags were. The problem is the UI was very old, and they were all checkboxes. And if you have, say, 20 scenes and 20 tags, then it goes off the screen. So then it just becomes unusable. Anyways, okay, so it goes back here. So those are like a quality of life type of feature that's been introduced. Extension migrator. So this is again more quality of life type of thing. I frequently jump between multiple machines, and when they decide to up the version, going from 2024 to 2025 on this machine and that machine and that machine, all of my setups gets all messed up. And that's been like that for past 15 years. and this is much better. That I don't have to nuke my overall setup and extensions that I already had set up on my machine. It basically migrates and imports those things. In SketchUp's side, we always had this. Uh, sorry, the as far as the shortcuts go, you can always export your shortcuts and save out something to your drive so that you can bring all of the shortcuts into different machines. So I always did that. Now with the migrator, if you have 2024 set of extensions, then you can choose migrate extension. I don't think this exists as a when you first install the 2025 version. So you just have to go to the warehouse and then migrator.
Yep.
And then you can download that and install. And once you install that, you have migrate extensions, and then you can use any of your previous versions of SketchUp and migrate those extensions onto your newest version of SketchUp. Quality of life improvement.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And purge unused reminder. What do you think? I think this is pretty descriptive of what it is, but it's a reminder. What do you think, Justin?
I think it's this is a direct result of the addition of the rendering features, because what happens is you start bringing in all of those HDRI files, and all of a sudden your textures aren't just lightweight single textures. You have 4 different maps that go along with the texture. And what happens is you just get all this junk in your SketchUp model, and it just sits there in your end model unless you purge everything. Like even if you use an HDRI image once, it stores it in the end model section until you purge it. So if you go through and you look at like 14 different HDRI images, those sit in your model until you purge out. So the purge unused reminder is to help people keep their SketchUp files manageable. I'm interested to see how this is going over with people that don't understand things like the ramifications of the size of models that they're bringing in and the size of materials they're bringing in, right? If they don't understand the difference between an 8K texture and a 1K texture, I'm interested to see how novices feel about this, but I do think it's important, and that's why it pops up all the time.
So Mackenzie and I were doing some 3D warehouse cool stuff last session, and something we realized was that the 3D warehouse things, a sofa is 9.7 meg. I feel that that's way too much. And we first thought it's because of some of the additional, because in 3D warehouse you can actually configure this further and change the size, that sort of thing. So maybe it's an additional additional live component that's influencing the overall size, was our first guess. And on live, obviously we try to purge and get rid of things and dematerialize. Maybe material was influencing and material is just too heavy, as you said. As you put material maps and that sort of thing, it really start to increase the size of the model. I've actually, Mackenzie, I did my homework of finding out why exactly. So here, the used material is these. If I get rid of that, all of those materials, and then save this once more, say reduced, then that's 788 kilobytes. It really was just the material that was
100%
adding. It's a quality material, but your sofa does not need to be, in the grand scheme of things, it does not need to be 10 megs. The thing is, so what I usually do is use an extension to get rid of the material on it, something like selection. I get rid of it. Even though I had gotten rid of it, the material is still in here. That's why purge is so important. And that's why I did this on last session. but forgot to purge. Therefore, it was still occupying my storage space. So I have a purge tool from Tigs as a shortcut so that it's a muscle memory for me to run this all the time so that I purge it. But now in 2025 version, as you try to save this or close out, they are going to send you a little reminder. Did you purge your model? Then you can say yes, and it's going to get rid of some of these things that are really not being used but still occupying your space.
Mm-hmm.
Is it going to?
No,
No,
it
not
may
this
not.
time. Not every
I don't
time.
think. Well, I don't.
I don't think it asks every single time.
I'm pretty sure it doesn't when none of that stuff changes, but in that case, it should have.
I know. I don't know when
It should have asked.
exactly. Also, I might have finally ticked off don't ask again
Yeah.
Right.
for my own benefit. So, yeah, because I haven't seen that in a while. So, I might have ticked this little settings here. Let me verify. I'm pretty sure I did. Because by muscle memory, I do it. Yeah. So,
Yeah, there it is.
that's why it didn't ask me to. But I think I think it's a good change because a lot of
It's
Novice users,
necessary.
it is a necessary thing because
Mhm.
especially like components that was used and then they'll have list of components that's not being used that's still occupying your model space. Every time I get a model handed over by another person, first thing I do is just purge the darn thing and see how
Mhm.
much of a weight loss I can have and just enjoy that. um, and then modeling tool improvements, some rotate tool, arc tools. Actually, there are a few things that I did want to point out here. I really like the rotate grips. That was one of the thing, and I became now I have a muscle memory too. If I want to rotate something from center, now I have a muscle memory to go to move tool instead
Mhm.
of going to rotate tool, which is completely counterintuitive thing. And I guess I developed into that. So when you're picking up an object, if you want to rotate, you rotate by center. Nobody rotates off of the axis. That's probably the poorest representation. But when you rotate something, you rotate like this. Nobody rotates off of a corner to something.
Right.
Whereas in SketchUp, you always kind of do that because when you're trying to rotate off of it, you got to use a reference point and you're always doing from the corner. That's how you rotate on SketchUp. Uh, Whereas, well, if I want to rotate from center, then I have to take a move tool and then actually find this little tiny crosses and then try to rotate them. And that's how it has been for the longest time. Now, finally, they have the same thing on rotate tool because that wasn't the case before.
That's nice.
I was going to say in Blender, you typically rotate from center when you
Right.
activate the rotate function. I
Right.
think. I
Right.
think. So, yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good point.
Yeah. So I think that's just a more intuitive way to use SketchUp. That's more normal to human. Rotate protractor, and then the arc, unbounding arc. There are different type of arc type of things. Did we mention the facet? Sorry, the chamfer.
Oh.
Or is that mentioned in there? This thing. You double click to round the corners, and then if
That's
you
so
double click
nice.
again, it just becomes pointy.
Yeah.
I was using this the other day, and something that I had realized though. Watch. When I do this on 3D object, if I do that, you see how it doesn't highlight?
Mm.
And I almost want to say it's a bug because if I double click, it shows up.
Mm.
And because that's how it's supposed to work, right? It should highlight the same way that it did when it was
I
a
mean, I would
flat
think so.
surface. Yeah.
I don't know why it wouldn't.
You see, when it's flat surface, it does automatically already the
Mm-hmm.
same radius, and you get all of these highlights. But when it is a
Interesting.
3D geometry, it doesn't do that. So something that I realized as I was modeling away. So that's perhaps something that they need to work out.
Yeah, agreed.
Was that mentioned here? Double click to repeat. Yep,
Yep.
that's what it was. What else? Modeling tool interoperability improvements, IFC. We touched on Revit interoperability aspect quite a bit on the last session, so we're gonna skip that. But as a Revit user, that is something that is really well done on the SketchUp side. Install V-Ray on Windows. That was sort of always the case, though. The installer always had the V-Ray V-Ray on Windows. That one was already always there, wasn't it?
I don't remember. I think maybe it was. I don't remember. I haven't used V-Ray in a bit, so
I haven't, but I always understood the installer included the tick box for V-Ray for SketchUp. Maybe that changed a little bit. I don't know.
yeah, I don't know.
Okay, and the style builder is gone. That was there all the time. The three suits, the style builder, SketchUp, and the layout was always installed for many, many years, and the style builder is now gone.
Nobody used Style Builder anyway, so
Yeah. Do you want to touch on layout a little bit?
I I mean I can touch on it just a little bit, but I mean there weren't massive changes. I mean there were some changes to like move, rotate, and scale. It's weird how some tools in layout act so different than
Mm-hmm.
SketchUp. But what this did is it gave you the ability to do like the base point with the move tool, kind of like the move tool works in SketchUp. Same thing with kind of the rotate tool and setting a reference point and then rotating. Same thing with the scale tool. So in my opinion, those are significantly better than they were for sure. It's just hopping into layout is kind of an odd experience because it's like jumping out of a 3D modeling program into like some weird combination of like publisher and SketchUp, right? It's like this weird kind of conglomeration of things.
Mm-hmm.
So the UI almost feels like it doesn't know what it wants to be. So it's nice to see this because it makes it easy, but it is kind of it's kind of a jarring move to go from SketchUp into layout right now. So, but these are definitely, they make it more like SketchUp. So I think
Consistent.
they're a lot better. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah. And then I haven't done too much with the join and split or the zoom window. I am very interested in the possibility of using some of the photoreal rendering in conjunction with stacked viewports in layout. So being able to render
Yes.
like a background and then stack line work on top of it, I think is a very interesting stylistic option that I need to do more with. But
Cool.
one thing I would like to see, and it's probably a pipe dream, but I would like to be able to create a scene with just your shadows. Like a shadow, like a shadow mask almost, and be able to create a scene with just shadows that I can make lighter or darker, and then like stack on top of things like you can line work in layout. I think that would be super interesting. Because again, it just gives you another option where you could just pull those out. Like maybe you could make them different colors or something like that, and just kind of put it all together. Because I do think one of the strengths of layout is the ability to combine different styles. I know that you kind of use it in order to combine raster viewports and vector viewports in order to get the best performance. But I do think there's some stylistic options here that kind of get interesting when you start combining the rendering over there. But yeah, a shadow mask would be fun for me. And also I would like to have the ability to make viewports transparent or not, like have a transparency slider.
Right.
That would be really nice too. Neither of which were added in this version. Those are just things that I would like. So
Okay, well, let's roll into some of the things that we would like, in addition to some of the ones that we already discussed.
my very favorite topic.
Yes, I understand you've recently done a poll of some kind for feature requests. What are those things that was discussed?
Yeah. So what I did, and I'm always actively checking comments on my videos or in the SketchUp forum and that kind of thing. So I see a lot of discussions about things that people want to add to SketchUp. And one of the unique things about being in the position that I'm in with the channel that I have is I have access to a lot of SketchUp users who are also passionate about the software the same way that I am. And so one of the things that I thought was, well, I would love to see some feedback on what the SketchUp community as a whole would like to see added to the program. Um, and I thought this was kind of a unique opportunity to say, hey, as the SketchUp community, what do you want? And so I put together like a 10 or 12 question poll. I don't remember how many questions I had, but it was basically things like, what do you do with SketchUp? Are you an architect? Are you an interior designer? Are you what do you do with SketchUp? And then what features would you like to see added? And then what features would you like to see added to the new renderer? What features would you like to see added to the new layout version? And actually, do I have the ability to share my screen?
Yes, of course.
Oh, I was going to say I can pull up some of those results
Oh, that'd be
and we
great.
can kind of look at them because um, I really appreciated people doing this, but I was able to get over 1,000 responses to that survey.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
So it gave a pretty good picture. And I did a video on this, and I've also posted the video in the SketchUp forum. And multiple people from the SketchUp team have seen these results as well.
There you go.
Hey, look, there's my screen. So
Oh, that's
so
awesome.
ironically, the way that Google's polls work, it actually cut off a bunch of the results when I was actually trying to look at them. So I ended up re-summarizing them in ChatGPT as graphics and then bringing them into SketchUp just so
Nice.
you could like see
That's great.
what was in here, which was a very weird thing to have to do, by the way. But but it actually worked out really well, and there's some really interesting data in here. But like one of the things I thought was interesting is by far architecture and interior design was the
Mhm.
heaviest use case for SketchUp, which I guess probably isn't surprising, but I know there are other uses in here as well, like woodworking, landscape architecture, contractors, but very heavily architecture and interior design focused, which kind of made sense to me.
Yeah.
And then, I was trying to figure out like how often do people use SketchUp? This was interesting not because a huge percentage of the people that watch the SketchUp Essentials YouTube channel use SketchUp a lot. Shocker, I know. But what was interesting is if I looked at the results for how often you use layout, it was kind of like the opposite. Like people
Oh.
are rarely using layout or, they're using it a couple times a month as opposed to
Mhm.
like constantly. So, and there's another interesting discussion there on what other softwares people are using instead, which is a little surprising to me. Because I said, okay, what's your primary 2D documentation tool? And I got way more AutoCAD responses than I thought that I was going to get. So, like a
Yeah.
lot of people said, oh, yeah, no, we're actually using AutoCAD for 2D documentation still. And I was like, all right, I did not 100% know that. So,
I know a
very,
lot of interior design companies will still use AutoCAD mainly because Revit's expensive. And
mm,
so whenever you're just doing residential design, you don't always need it for your client. So you just do AutoCAD. And they'll use a lot of SketchUp as like, here's what it looks like whenever it's all done up.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
the price
That makes
difference
sense.
between Revit and SketchUp is steep, and I
Hmm.
believe it is like in the realm of 5 times more expensive. So yeah, it makes sense for them to also stay in AutoCAD because between AutoCAD and Revit. Revit is more expensive as well.
Mm.
Anyways, go ahead.
Gotcha. Nope, you're good. That's interesting for me because my background is a general contractor. So like I don't necessarily have the inside information on what designers are doing.
Mhm.
So that's actually like really interesting for me. So but yeah, after asking people like how often they use SketchUp, sorry, you've got the this was for my thumbnail. So
So
Nice.
fun.
yeah. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna hide. Oh, well, that's not what I meant to do, but it looks cool, doesn't it? Okay.
Yeah, I colored it. Yeah.
Top down view. There we go. So I'm also not a professional poll maker, so I made a little bit of a mistake here, or a professional survey maker. So one of the questions I asked was, what are the core features that you want to see added? And I kind of did a little bit of like interspersing layout with SketchUp. And I kind of wish I would have kept it separate, but I think this was good because it really kind of cast a light on an area where I think a lot of people would like to see some improvement. And that's just like how layout fits in a workflow. So I mean, there were a couple layout options in here, but I kind of filtered those out, just so that we could look specifically at SketchUp core features. And so the bevel fillet chamfer tool has been a request for like ever. So I'm not surprised to see that kind of topping out that feature list at all. I was a little surprised to see advanced architectural tools this high up on the list. And I was a little bit vague with the question, but it would be tools for automating architecture, right? So like a wall tool, a door tool that would actually like cut openings. And I think it's more like just for kind of that smart architectural modeling.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a bigger desire there than I would have originally thought. So I thought that was a little bit interesting, but also not surprising when I thought about it, because I do see a lot of new users struggle with, well, I'm trying to cut the hole in the wall for the window and it's not cutting. It's like, well, yeah, you're outside of the group. Well, what do you mean I'm outside of the group? And it's like, if you're new, it's a lot,
Yeah.
right? You don't understand what grouping geometry means and like when geometry merges and when holes cut and when they don't. So I can see you wanting to be like, do you just have a tool that can do this for me?
Mm-hmm.
Like I could definitely see people wanting that for sure.
Do you think people are? I mean, there's a lot in this, I guess, for the answers, and the AI had to just kind of interpret the questions and just all edit in there. But walls to, like, let's say 5-inch thick wall, 6-inch thick wall, or 8-inch thick wall. You just define it and just draw a line, and the wall thickness just continues. Versus, yeah, as you said, like make penetration or opening, windows or doors, things like that, and then just define a size and it just plunks it into place. Versus SketchUp is very manual intensive in terms of making the wall, and then you got to cut a rectangle open in it and make the right size, and you got to put a trim for the door. All of that becomes labor intensive, and that all might factor into those things. And even if you use like window component and such, you still need to cut the hole on the wall in order to put like a component on, because you have to get a different extension for double cut, so that you can cut through and through the component, that sort of thing. So I think they're wanting that sort of more advanced tool. Yeah, simplicity in terms of usage. But SketchUp is kind of formed in different ways, so I don't know if it ever wants to go that direction.
Right.
Yeah.
That and that, like that's the thing with this is it's so complicated. Like when you start going down this path, it becomes like, how are you automating building elements, and how does SketchUp recognize when a building, and before you know it, you have Revit. So it's like, well, you gotta be careful, right? So I thought this was interesting, and I'll be interested to see if that's ever something that SketchUp goes in that direction. But I mean, section cut fills is something that I would love to see. Being able to do hatching in walls and things like that, because there's not really a good way to show materiality in walls right now when you go into your 2D documentation without doing a whole bunch of workarounds. So
What's
like
a
this.
section cut fills though? Is it not Poche that SketchUp already does? Just a pattern?
Yeah, it would be a pattern like an insulation or like a concrete or
Oh, I
something
see.
like that.
Hatching. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. I see.
not like the color,
Okay.
right?
Got it.
Like an actual material hatch, preferably a vector hatch. Um, because right now you basically have to like work around that in some way or another, and it's kind of painful.
Mm-hmm.
If you need to show something in your section cuts at the moment.
Right.
You know, dark mode is an interesting one to me. Like I have dark mode in most of the other 3D modeling programs that I use. So I would like to see a dark mode for sure.
Yeah.
I I'm there's got to be a reason why it's harder to add than I would think that it would be.
There
Because
are.
it
I'm aware of a few, including all of your extensions currently are all developed for the light mode.
Mhm.
SketchUp is a little bit different in the aspect of it works in conjunction with user or developer other third party provided extensions. And if they were
Mhm.
to flip and change to dark mode, then all the icons are gonna be wrong. And especially the ones that are not being touched since for however years ago, then it is not
Mhm.
gonna show well on the dark mode. So that's a little bit of an inside story that I've heard in the past, that the reason why they were being held back in terms of dark mode. As to, I've suggested, I can remember at least 10 years back, like when Photoshop first had their dark mode, I was like, you need to have dark mode on SketchUp. And somewhere on the forum, somebody said, yeah, but pen and paper, it's a white paper with black text and everything. Why would you revert that? And I'm like, well, I don't know where to have conversation with you anymore, but
Yeah, I don't
yeah.
know how to have this discussion with you
Yeah.
anymore.
Yes.
Yeah. Hmm.
But yes, I'm
Yeah.
absolutely for dark mode.
Mm-hmm.
I prefer to have that just to save electricity, if anything.
Yeah.
Right.
Save your eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, so I love that discussion. Sorry, I keep looking over here because I moved you guys over to this monitor.
No, that's
So
okay.
every time I talk to you, I'm no longer looking at you, and it's
Yeah.
really strange. But yeah, I like that discussion though, because it feels like every time things get talked about online, not every time, but there's always like this, well, people just aren't listening to what I want. And it's like, well, this stuff is complicated, right? You
Mm-hmm.
change one thing and it affects a bunch of other things, and they all have to be considered before you start making changes. So it's not all, if you're not seeing a feature added that you want to see added, it's not necessarily because people aren't listening to what you're asking for.
Right.
It's because there are challenges around software development that have to be overcome before you can do things a lot of the time. So
Mm-hmm.
it's nice to have that discussion of, well, did you think about this? Oh, that's a good point. So
All right.
it's
So
definitely
true.
nice to, yeah. Let's see, and I'm not going to go through this whole list, obviously, but a couple others that kind of stood out to me that I think would be good would be the scene grouping and folders.
Yep.
To me, the
Mhm.
way you have to stack viewports when you go over into layout, the fact that you can't group scenes into folders is kind of bonkers to me.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the time you have to have like a wall layer, and you have to have a floor layer, and you have to have a cabinet layer, and like all these things that kind of like stack together because you might need like dotted lines or something like that. And so you've got the same camera view over and over again with different settings that you have to stack, but you can't group all of those into one group right now.
Right.
And so what happens is you've just got like, I have this kitchen model that I've done for like course members in my course. And it's just like scenes, scenes, scenes,
Yeah.
scenes. And
And then you got to
like,
keep
it's
So
going
true.
the
Yeah.
next
yeah.
page.
And every time you do a new section cut, you have to create all those scenes
Yeah.
because you're stacking this stuff on top. If you're doing complex drawings, right?
Yeah.
You can just throw like a vector single scene over. But once you get into like dotted lines and dashed lines and things like that, you're going to have more than one scene.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that almost ties into the layout thing for me. And then like the spline drawing tool, like I would really love to see like a what's Fredo's curve tool? Fredo
Fredo
spline.
spline
Yeah, yeah,
or
Fredo spline.
okay.
But I would love to see some more advanced curve editing functions
Isn't
in
that Bezier
SketchUp.
curve?
No, that's a different one.
Okay, never
That
mind.
that that is one of them. But no, it's
But overall, better curve control.
yeah, and I mean you can like
Wow.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like that, but built into SketchUp. And there's a bigger discussion here of at what point does SketchUp need to start adding tools to its tool set that aren't third-party extensions that people have to pay for.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a bigger discussion. But I do think now that we have an iPad version and now that we have a web version, you can't just say, well, you can get these tools with extensions. It's like,
Which
well, I
doesn't
can't
work
get,
on, yeah.
yeah, you can't, I mean, you can use follow me tool to bevel edges, but it's very manual. So like, if you're going to have those tools, it would be really nice if you could add functions to those tools, and you can't right now. So
Mm-hmm.
like, you got to kind of pick one or the other.
Yep.
But anyway, advanced modeling tools were lower down on this list than I expected for the most part, other than bending and deforming tools. So like lofting and skinning and stuff like that. And I'm not going to make you go through this whole thing with me. But so another thing I asked about was the rendering engine.
Mm-hmm.
And the numbers are not over here because ChatGPT, but by far the biggest thing people requested for the rendering engine is artificial lighting.
Well, with this
Which
edition, yeah,
Yeah.
it will make sense too. Because largely the environmental and photoreal material also, like, they only affect so much on exterior only. In interior, they were quite limiting. I didn't show that part, but on interior scenes, everything is in shadow, in sharp shadows. So having artificial lights effect, I think, will also be quite useful.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing, and I mean that's kind of where the second item is. I don't know if they're going to add a path tracer or not, but the problem with the way the rendering works right now is it's very much like a raster renderer, right? So the way that it shows the way the light bounces, if you're inside of a building and you've got a shiny object or a reflective object, it'll actually reflect the environment and not the model
Mm-hmm.
that's in there. So if you're like inside of an interior, because of the way it's doing the lighting, it's not actually showing the inside of the building in the reflection. It's showing the environment from the outside. And that's why you used to have to do like reflection probes and things like that in other softwares in order to, before they had path tracing, in order to get good reflections. But that's a limitation here too.
Right.
So there's just some weird things with the interior lighting. And I think a lot of people are kind of waiting to see where that goes before they like fully adopt the rendering capabilities.
Right.
Not to say that this isn't interesting, but I think I'll be interested to see what they do with that.
Mm-hmm.
But one other thing I have seen a lot, and it kind of goes with this PBR material library, but it kind of doesn't, is the way that the materials preview right now, you can't really tell what they are. So like I can't make this bigger. I can't change this to a sphere, and I can't change the size of the material on here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So if you go into the brick, right, and it's probably better. No, this is fine. You can't really tell what the material is with this small of a
change
preview.
the format or
Mhm.
size, or is it a cube, is it a round thing, is it a floor,
Right.
wall type of thing? Yeah.
But I mean that was another one of the requests, and I kind of agree with that. It would be nice to have a better PBR material library in here, because like the brick, like I'm not even sure this is brick. This looks like rusty metal.
It really does.
Yeah, I mean, so there's brick in here, but there were more brick options in the older version of SketchUp. And granted, there's a PBR material library that you can go into in the 3D warehouse and download some additional materials.
Yeah.
But even those, like the previews are really small, and it's just kind of really hard to tell like what's going on with them. So I think having some more materials that are kind of built in and being able to see them a little better would also be desired. So
yeah, interesting.
yeah.
Do you have like favorite extension poll kind of thing?
No.
No, I
That'd be
think
an interesting one.
yeah, that would be an interesting one because with amount of your base you have, having a poll on what's their
Just
top
like, please don't.
3 favorite one. I think that would be an interesting one to see.
Well, that's always an interesting. So this happens to me every base camp, by the way. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and I'm actually gonna look at you guys because so that happens to me every base camp. Somebody walks up to me and they're like, "What's the best extension?" And I'm like, "For what? Like, what do you mean?" You know, it's like what? I mean, architectures is a fantastic extension for textures. Like, I love it, but if you're trying to draw curves, it's terrible. You know, but that's kind of what polling around extensions is like, it's so personal to your needs that a landscape architect has a completely different set of needs than an architect.
I know, but
So
it's personal of yours. I would ask like what's the top 3 or top 5 extensions that you use most frequently. And my top of the list is like purge all. Because as a muscle memory, I just use that all the time. And I wouldn't say it is important for everybody. Now that they actually have a purge reminder, that should be less needed. But again, like it's just something that is personal to me that I've grown into. So I don't know. I think, having a bit of a survey on 3, 5, your favorite extension or something that you use most frequently, then that might tell an interesting story. Some extensions that people didn't know about.
Well, and you know what? That might have given some interesting, because what I'm planning on doing is I would like to rerun this survey every year.
Nice.
Because my goal here, like, first of all, it's not to like push the SketchUp team in a direction.
No.
But at the same time, what a lot of people need to understand is when you work for a big company like Trimble, you have to justify putting resources in a certain direction. So if I can provide that data and be like, hey, this is what people are looking for, and project managers can take that data and turn around and say, hey, we should spend time developing these features because this is what people need. Like, that's the goal. So like, I'm hoping to rerun it every year and also just let it be kind of a thing where it doesn't get forgotten and lost in the shuffle. Because like I don't know if you've seen like the Twinmotion roadmap or the Lumion roadmap, like they have those product board pages where they show what's in development and everything else. But what it does is it gives people a place to go back to see like what's being worked on and what people have voted for and what's important. And I think it's harder for SketchUp to do that just because of the way that Trimble is like organized. So if this is something where I can hit it every year and be like, oh, as a reminder, by the way, we talked about these features last year. And when SketchUp does add some of them, be like, hey, just as a reminder, they are listening to you, or this is still a need that people have wanted for a long time, and document that. I think all of that helps move the program forward.
I see.
So I'm planning on rerunning this every year and just being like, hey, what's up this year? But adding the extension question could be a good one for next year, because it does, I guess, give an insight into what tools people find the most valuable that they are adding to SketchUp. So that's a good point.
And if it is answered really well by an extension, that's absolutely fine. And and maybe that person, whoever developed it, becomes a favorite person of everybody. But it just means that SketchUp is missing, or perhaps needs to turn a little bit of focus towards that area. So
Well, first of all, I mean, I think it's pretty clear that I love SketchUp extensions, right? Like every time I go to Basecamp, I present on SketchUp extensions, right? I
Yeah.
have over 600 videos
Yeah.
on SketchUp extensions on my channel, or some crazy number like that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But I do think there's a discussion of some things should be native tools in the program to make it a complete program, because otherwise it does feel kind of incomplete as a modeling tool. So I think that there is a time to have that discussion.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to do right now. Is like, hey, what should be native if SketchUp was to grow? Because I
And
think some
I
should be.
think in the past, because SketchUp was Make versus Pro, and Make did not have the version to take all the extensions. So Pro version, you had to get Pro version in order to get extensions, and it made absolute sense. And when you start using Pro version, you can have all the benefits of the extensions, which is great. But now we have introduced iPad version, the web version, which is basically the replacing of the Make version. But
Right.
you have to have Pro or Studio subscription in order to gain access to some of those things. So, you need to build a bit more native features in order for it to function the same on iPad or web version, that sort of thing. So I think it's now time to redefine, what becomes native as well. I think that's definitely an interesting point.
Yeah, 100%.
Yep. Yep.
100%. And we'll see where it goes. I do think, having talked to people at Basecamp on the SketchUp team, I think I walked away from this one a little bit more excited about the direction of the program as a whole, just with some of the people that I talked to on some
That's
of
cool.
the teams, and just kind of the way that they're looking at things and things like that. So I am excited. And I do think the render engine, even though it's kind of a stylized thing at this point, like a modern 3D modeling program should have built-in rendering.
Yeah.
And they're starting to add it. And I think that's a good thing. So,
Yep.
yeah.
I believe so as well. And, as 2026 comes around, we'll look into that and react to that again too. Yeah, so we are at 30 minutes over our slated time. So I'm gonna
Oh,
start
sorry.
No, it's all right. We had a ton of fun here. So not to be sorry at all, but I'm
Good
gonna
conversation.
wrap it up here. Some of later things that I would like to talk about would be perhaps a bit deeper dive in a 3D warehouse, and I wanted to talk about some more rendering engines that are not as familiar for me. So I wanted to have like a guest speaker like Justin himself, or somebody who's more knowledgeable on certain type of render on a show, so that we have a better insight on certain type of extensions or render. And I wanted to talk about SketchUp iPad perhaps in the future. So the plan is to have more guest speakers in the future. So, and we would love to have you again if you're available. And if
100%.
if there's any topic that you would like to just have an hour or hour and a half or 2 hours to have a conversation with, we'll welcome you as well. So hope to see you next time, and perhaps next week on a different topic. We'll come up with something and have a good conversation with, and perhaps we see you next week or later in the future.
Definitely in the future.
Yep.
I'll have to check on next week, but yeah, for sure.
All right.
No, this is fun.
Yep. Well, thank you so much, Justin, for coming along and giving your insights and thoughts on the SketchUp 2025 version. And I'll see you all next time. Bye.
Bye.
All right. I think I ended there.